Hello class. Today we're going to start talking about anxiety disorders. In the past, in previous DSMs, there was really only, to my understanding, one, maybe two categories of anxiety disorders. That is to say, most of them really fit under today what we're going to just call anxiety disorders. However, in the DSM-5, what we see is that that category has been split up into three separate categories, all of which do share some anxiety as at least maybe a central symptom or perhaps just a symptom of the disorders underlying these categories. But we do have these two other categories that try to group these types of anxiety disorders into more like-minded or like-typed categories. So in addition to just the anxiety disorders, which we'll get through today, and we'll try to get to these other two categories, we also have trauma and stress-related disorders. You may also see this as trauma and stressor-related disorders. I'm just trying to save some space here. And then, of course, obsessive-compulsive disorders, which are going to share some similar features as well. So again, you would have seen these things put together, all just anxiety disorders. If you know anything about PTSD, for instance, before we get to talk about it, you know that there's going to be some anxiety that goes along with that. If you know anything about an obsessive compulsive disorder, you also know that there's some anxiety that goes along with that. So you can see how they may fit together, right? There is a big anxiety component to both of these other types of disorders, but what they're trying to do here really in the DSM-5 is come to some understanding of what are the diagnostic or symptom constellations that tend to go together, such that they feel like these disorders have more psychologically in common than do these disorders kind of across these lines. So just keep that in mind. I only say that to say these all are going to seem like they have a lot of anxiety, but just thinking about which of them are true anxiety disorders and which of them are demonstrating or expressing some anxiety, but really it's more about that obsession, or really it's more about that trauma, right? Here's the distinction. So what we're going to start doing for the rest of the class is really just looking through these different categories and then really trying to understand most of, if not each of the disorders, and just have a bit of a conversation with you about that. I won't ask you, you just have two more papers coming up before the final, and so I'm not going to be asking you to memorize in any extent what these diagnostic criteria are or anything like that, but I'm really more interested in you having an understanding of what these criteria mean and what the disorders are going to either look like, or at least just understand what they're supposed to look like. That being said, one thing you'll also see from here on out is that I will start including some videos that are not just me lecturing into this playlist. That is to say, videos I'm not making, but videos that I have found and would usually show in class, but it doesn't really make sense for me to show you on camera a video I can just link in the playlist. So if it's on YouTube, and most of them are, then you'll just see me slide that into the playlist. And I will try to mention it in the video, in these lecture videos as well. If you see a video in there, just watch it if I forget to mention it, and hopefully it'll be pretty obvious just what disorder or what thing we're talking about that it's trying to speak to. All right, let's get into this. Let's look at what some of these disorders housed under the anxiety disorders specifically are, and here's a nice segue. The first one is a specific phobia. Now, the specific phobia is just the phobias that you've heard of. These are real diagnoses, but we don't have a diagnosis for each one of those phobias. That would be too extensive. And what we've done instead is we've just put together this diagnostic or this diagnosis that really fits all of them. So the specific phobia is really just talking about any of those phobias that you've heard about, claustrophobia, arachnophobia, clownophobia, heightsophobia, I don't know them all, but just those different phobias of very specific things that the person has really, and the hallmark here is that they have an overreaction to, that their reaction to the anxiety or to the threat as perceived is more than what would be expected. So sometimes you'll see folks have, quote, phobias to things that are really actually just frightening. So heights, maybe some type of a snake or something, some type of animal that really, it makes sense to some degree to be afraid of that. But what we're looking for in particular when we're looking for a phobia, especially with something, again, that does generate some fear on its own, what we're looking for is that out of proportion? Is there an overreaction to that? And you're going to see this actually with a lot of these anxieties. Is there some worry that comes even in the absence of the thing that you're afraid of, or you have some phobia about, right? So if I have some fear of spiders, it makes sense that when I see a spider, I might jump back and not want to touch it. But it gets to be a little bit more diagnostic if I won't go in a room that has a spider in it. Somebody, says in the classroom, hey, there's a spider on this wall over here, and I won't even come in the whole classroom, or maybe I won't go in the classroom for several days because the spider might still be in there. That type of thing. Also, again, calling it up when it's not even present. So this would be something like, I'm sitting at home, watching TV on the couch, and nothing about a spider's on the television, nothing about a spider is around me, and suddenly I go, oh my gosh, I hope there is not a spider in the room, right? I suddenly have that fear of a thing that's not even around. I'm just worrying about it. Or maybe I'm worrying about the fact that, oh my gosh, I have to go to work the next day and tomorrow, and that spider might still be in that room. I hope somebody killed it. I should have left a note, right? Now I'm thinking about that thing, even though it's not around. I'm not seeing it and getting afraid. I'm kind of calling that fear up in my head, and that would be another one of these diagnostic pieces of the specific phobia. Is it's not just that when you see the thing, it's fearful to you. That might be okay, again, depending on what it is. It's about the proportionality of that fear, right? That's not a dangerous spider, even if it was, right next to a hospital or whatever it is. There's no need, to run out of the room screaming and, saying, I'm going to quit my job. I thought you got rid of all the spiders in here, right? That would be out of proportion. And then it's also really going to be about how much of your time do you spend worrying about this thing, even when it's not a threat to you? How much time do you spend worrying that you might have to go to this building where there might be spiders, or that you might have to show up to this birthday party and there may be a clown there? Meanwhile, you don't even have kids yet, right? You're just kind of worried about, how am I going to get through that thing in my life? Again, even though it's not really a threat. So you can look up the diagnostic criteria. I won't give them all for all of these, but that's going to be on page 2. Nope, it's going to be on page 197. So if you're interested, this is in the DSM. So if you're interested in just kind of looking up the specific criteria for this disorder, you can do that. But generally, it's what I've said. So you can look it up for that verbatim piece if you're interested. Now, I will read some of them, but this one isn't. It just says the fear is out of proportion, basically. Selective mutism. So both selective mutism and separation anxiety, the one that I'll talk about next, both of these are more likely, and most likely, I guess I should say, to be diagnosed in children. These tend to be ways that children express anxiety, more so with selective mutism, though separation anxiety is still mostly something that we would expect to see in children. We would begin to think about probably a personality disorder, depending on how it looked. But if somebody that's an adult starts to have this type of anxiety about a particular person, we would probably, and that's considering they don't have some other type of intellectual disability, of course, but otherwise, if they have this type of separation anxiety, we might consider that some type of dependent personality, for instance. But in most cases, these two are both going to be diagnosed in children, so we're not going to see it as much, certainly, on adults. And selective mutism, I think, is something that if you've ever met a kid, certainly if you've ever met many kids, you probably can get a sense of what this would look like. I'm going to take a little tangent here and say I like talking about anxiety, and I think I've said this about some other disorders broadly, but I like talking about anxiety in particular because it is the type of thing that I think most folks can recognize either in another person. Not to say that you can tell when someone's anxious, but you know what that looks like, right? You know if somebody's biting their fingernails, or they're tapping their foot, or they're sweating really frantically, right? You know the sort of signs of it, even if you can't tell moment by moment. And you certainly probably also know what it feels like to some degree, right? You've been worried about a test, you've been afraid of what's going to happen when your parents find out, you've been concerned that you ran over the thing that your mom told you to pick up out of the drive, whatever it is, right? You felt some fear, you felt some anxiety, and so I think a little bit more even than depression, and certainly more than some of the other disorders we'll talk about. I think anxiety is the one that most folks can go, okay, I know what that kind of feels like, or I can imagine if that went on for this long, or I can imagine if that got really intense, that would feel a certain way. And so with selective mutism, this is something you've probably seen in a kid, though not diagnosable. Kids just tend to do this. It's when it gets extreme that it's a problem. So this is just a kid who's really shy and won't speak. And so you've probably seen this on a kid. Maybe you meet a kid for the first time, or you have a friend and you meet their kid, or you have a friend and you meet their, very young brother or sister. And they're like, hey, Billy, this is my friend Todd. Say hi to Todd. And Billy is hiding behind mom's skirt. Right? He doesn't want to talk to anybody he doesn't know. We call that, and it's healthy in many regards, we call that stranger anxiety, right? That you are supposed to, once you're at a certain age, kind of have this anxiety around folks that you don't know, such that you maybe don't want to talk to them, or you're just watching them, this type of thing. And so you've probably seen kids do this, right? You can tell that they're interested, right? They're not so afraid of you that they're running out of the room. You can tell that maybe they're curious about who you are, but they just won't speak to you. And often this looks like they're just not speaking to you at first, right? And once you've been there for a while, once they've gotten to know you, or maybe even mom or dad or brother or sister kind of pushes them out from behind their skirt and says, no, go say hi to Todd, or whatever, and they can manage to say, hi Todd, I'm so-and-so, right? They can still put that effort forward. But what we see with selective mutism is that we can't get past this, right? This kid will not get past that kind of that mute shyness, that shy muteness, if you will, such that this kid may only have one or two people that they ever speak to. Maybe it's mom and sister, or mom and teacher, or teacher and brother, right? There's only a couple people that this person will ever really speak to. Otherwise, they're going to have this kind of shy quietness about them all the time. Maybe such that other folks will think that they can't speak, that they are in fact mute. But again, this is called selective mutism, right? Because the child, in some way, of course, is choosing not to speak, is selecting not to speak in a particular occasion. But they can speak. It's just that there's this anxiety for whatever reason, right? Just kind of being quiet, sort of a hiding, really behavior that kids will show. And this is an extreme version of that, right? Such that they get so anxious that they really won't speak to anybody outside of somebody that they're really, really close to. Again, usually one or two people, and no one else will ever hear them speak. Just want to do a little bit on that. Might pass it. So the one thing I think might be important just to know about that, this is on page 195, by the way, is that you're looking at something that needs to occur for about 1 month. So again, it's not just this is a person who's shy in a moment, or you're on vacation and they're kind of getting to know Uncle Betty, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I'm fine. They're kind of getting to know Uncle Betty, and day 3, Uncle Betty's their favorite person, and so, but before that, right, they're just really shy, and that would be normal, right? Especially if it's person to person, right? Once I've warmed up to this person, I will speak to them, but here's another new person I'm not going to speak to. And so that's relatively normal, but what isn't is, here's a person I never speak to, and even after I've warmed up to them, I'm still not going to really speak to them. I'm only going to speak to mom. And here's another person that I'm never going to warm up to. I'm only still going to speak to mom. So you'll see that with a kind of a normal developmental mutism, if you will, you'll see that it's going to be person to person. With these kids, it's really going to be everybody except X or Y, usually mom or dad. Separation anxiety, again, is another one that's really going to look more at children in terms of who we're diagnosing this for, or who we're diagnosing this on. Separation anxiety is what it sounds like. It is a child usually who has some fear of losing contact, and when I say losing contact, almost literally, not necessarily physical contact, but losing sight of, or the person leaving the house, or the person going to work, or going, on a trip or a vacation without them. That this child is going to experience a lot of anxiety around that event. Again, that is relatively out of proportion to what we would expect. This, just like mutism in a general sense, or in a kind of shy sense, separation anxiety is also something that's relatively normal, right? We expect to see the child have some anxiety, have some concern or distress whenever the parent or whomever their guardian is leaves. We expect that, in fact, if you've taken a gen psych course, or you've taken a developmental psych course, right, that is a part of attachment, right? We would expect that the kid is going to be upset when mom or dad leaves. In fact, if they aren't upset, that's more problematic than if they are. So here in this separation anxiety disorder, what you have is not just that, right? And that's not like the selective mutism, where you expect it to warm up eventually, it is like a selective mutism, where even after it's been happening for a while, they never really warm up to it. It is this thing that they kind of are always anxious about. I'm sorry, I'm stuttering today. But the real hallmark of the separation anxiety disorder isn't that separation, or isn't that anxiety in the midst of the separation. Again, this is something that's relatively normal. What's unique about this diagnosis, or what makes it really diagnosable, is that this kid is thinking about separation even when their parents are not separated from them. If it's their parents, they've got the anxiety about it. So this is, mom went to work, she's come home, kid always freaks out when mom goes to work. He is at school, he wants to call her 3 or 4 times a day. At lunch, once he's not distracted by whatever's going on in the classroom, he's usually crying and wants to talk to her, wants to go home, this type of thing, right? And again, some of that's actually relatively normal. Some of that's normal, especially if it's maybe a new school or the kid's really young. So that's not the big deal. The big deal is later when mom comes to pick him up and she's taking him home and they're in the middle of the dinner. Let's say it's Friday night, so kid's not going back to school for another 3 days. Well, all over the weekend, or all through the weekend, the kid keeps saying to mom, do I have to go back to school again? I really hate it there. I mean, you're not going to be there, or you're not going to leave me there again, are you? Right? And the kid is constantly sort of worried about the fact that mom is going to, or may leave him again in the future. Or, the kid is really worried about the fact that, mom's got a vacation that she went on a year ago, and she was gone for a whole week, and for the whole year, right, the kid is constantly worried about the fact that mom might leave me for a week again. Mom, you're not gonna do that again. Where are you going? Where are you going, right? She's just going to the car to, get something out of the glove compartment, and the kid's kind of freaking out. Where are you going? Where are you going? This is more of the separation anxiety, right? Not just the fact that, hey, I'm dropping you off at school and the kid's upset, and then you go pick them up and they're happy to see you, and they're not freaking out about the fact that you left them all day, and they're not worried about tomorrow too much. No, that's going to be, again, especially if it's a very young kid, or especially if it's a new place, new school, you will see some of that. But it's not this constant anxiety of, when are you going to leave me again, no matter how long I've been there or who I've known. So again, this is really going to be about the fact that that child is worried about the separation, even again when it is not happening. Let me see if I can just find you a page. Well, it is in here somewhere. It's the first 190. Tell him, kind of going out of order. All right, panic disorder. Here's another one where the real issue of the disorder isn't the thing that it's named after. It's really the worrying about the thing that it's named after. So panic disorder, of course, is going to be a disorder where a person has panic attacks. Now, often a person's going to have some other diagnosis if they're having panic attacks, though a panic attack can just happen if you get particularly stressed out, or sometimes there's some type of medication or drug induction, but usually it's going to also come with something else. So you might see a specific phobia or a social anxiety, or what I've forgotten to write actually, which is a general anxiety disorder. So with the panic disorder, what's really going on is this is a person who's having panic attacks, or has at least had a panic attack in the past. And the nature of their anxiety isn't that they have panic attacks. That, again, can go along with any of these, or really any of these. It's that they're worried about the panic attacks. That is really the thing that they seem to be most concerned about. Well, what does this look like? This looks like somebody who maybe had a particularly stressful week and, I don't know, did some drugs, whatever it is, but they had a panic attack. And for whatever reason, again, they've had a panic attack, but no other real diagnosis, no general anxiety, no PTSD, nothing like that. They just somehow managed to give themselves or have a panic attack due to whatever situation they were in. So now this person has had a panic attack, but doesn't really, again, without it, have any of these other types of anxiety. But what you end up seeing is that a person with a panic disorder starts worrying, starts having anxiety about any future or the potential for a future panic attack. This often looks like, what if I have one of these and I'm standing up here in front of the camera and everybody's looking at me, and then I forget to cut that part out of the clip, and then all my students think I'm not right. It's this kind of ruminating, right? This sort of thinking too hard, worrying about this thing, again, that may or may not happen, of course, such that in this case, you might actually cause it, unfortunately. Right? It's not like separation anxiety, where if I keep worrying about the fact that mom's going to leave, she's just going to leave me, unless she just needs a break from my worrying. But I'm not kind of directly causing it. Or the same with the selective mutism. I guess that's not the one that you're really worried about things about. But certainly here in the panic disorder, what can happen is you are so concerned or so worried about having a panic attack that you give yourself a panic attack. Now, that is just going to cause a snowball effect, because now you're also worried about worrying about having a panic attack, as well as worried about having a panic attack. So now you have two things to worry about, and worry likes company. So you're going to sort of spin yourself into this kind of cycle of having panic attacks because you're worried about having panic attacks. And so again, it usually comes with some type of, not just I don't want to have that panic attack, but what if people see me like this, or what if I'm, in the middle of something important and it causes me to lose, or what if I get stuck in that feeling and I'm panicked 100% of the time. That, by the way, is impossible in a panic attack. Your body is really aroused. That is to say, physiologically aroused in terms of heart rate, breathing, sweating, right? This type of thing. It's often why some folks will hyperventilate when they're having a panic attack because they're so worked up, right? Their body it's like you're running a race, but you're usually just standing or sitting somewhere. And so because of the sort of physical nature of a panic attack, what ends up really happening is you'll either just stop or you'll fall asleep. You'll fall unconscious. Your body can't maintain that for long. And so sometimes, in the past, I've had folks, call in to places I've worked or to different offices I've been a clinician at, and sometimes they're in the midst of a panic attack, or they want to talk about any future panic attacks, right? Again, it's kind of that sign of the panic disorder of, hey, what if this happens again? I'm really freaking out about that now. And they'll say one of the things they're often worried about is that they will be stuck like this forever, especially in the midst of it, right? Or I'm having a heart attack, or I'm having a stroke, something like that. There's some worry in it that this is going to kill me, or I'm going to be stuck in this forever, right? And so often some really important things to do if you're dealing with somebody who's in the midst of a panic attack is to let them know, if it's clearly not a heart issue, if it's clearly just a panic attack, you cannot die from this, right? This will not kill you. That's step one, and you're not going to get stuck like this. Your body can't tolerate that for long. It'll stop itself, even if you're still kind of thinking about the worry. You might still, be a little bit anxious in your head, but your body's not going to be able to do the panic for very long at all. And even if you can't get yourself to stop in a waking state, often people will just kind of cry themselves to sleep, or kind of fall asleep in the midst of that, and wake up, not panicked anymore. So, those are just some pieces to consider, right? If you need some kind of practical solutions to somebody either in the midst of a panic attack, or somebody who's thinking about panic attacks in the future. What if I get stuck? What if it happens like this? What if it causes my heart to stop, right? Most of those things are not possible, not true. And just some information can sometimes be helpful to some folks in terms of stopping a panic attack. Other people, it is an emotional response, and so logic isn't necessarily going to meet the day. Sometimes it's really just about being available and comforting, and giving them a place to kind of unravel, and in demonstrating that that's okay, and you're not going to laugh at them, and this type of thing, such that when they come back together, they aren't so wrapped up in, oh my God, I can't believe you saw me like that, and I couldn't pull. There's already a lot of shame and anxiety and embarrassment that goes along with it. They don't need the extra piece of somebody not being supportive, or somebody feeling like they're being laughed at, that type of thing. So panic disorders, again, really it is more about that that sense of worrying about another panic attack in the future, more than it is just I have panic attacks. Because you could have a panic attack with a separation anxiety, right? You could have a kid who is worried about their mom leaving, and they're always asking, and here it is Monday morning, we gotta go to school, panic attack, right? You can imagine that happening. And then also maybe this kid worrying about both now. Mom, if you leave me again, that thing's gonna happen. You know, that's gonna be a little bit of therapy, guys. All right, so this panic disorder is on page 208 in the DSM. All right, these are two that folks are usually really interested in. Social anxiety disorder and then agoraphobia. I'm announcing them together because they have a lot of similarities. That is to say, if somebody just said, I don't like going in public, or I don't like being around people, or being in public or being around people makes me anxious, makes me nervous, right? At first guess, it's probably one of these, but you can't really tease it apart at that superficial description of what the problem is, right? So both of these folks might come in and say, hey, I don't like being in crowds, I don't like being in public, I don't like being in public spaces, these type of things. But you gotta dig into the psychology a little bit to understand whether or not it's more of an agoraphobic response. And by the way, you'll see this word phobia used often here. We're kind of coming away from it. Social phobia is the older term for this. We've now kind of just call it social anxiety disorder, but in the DSM-4 it was called a social phobia. And then here again, you've got a phobia, but neither of these are true phobias in the way the specific phobia is. Phobia just means fear, and so here we are. But in the social anxiety disorder, what you're gonna see is that person doesn't wanna go to that public space, not because of the space, but because of the people in the space. And in particular, somebody with social anxiety is not just worried about people seeing them or isn't just worried about being around people. What's really going on, right? And here's where it would take you digging in a little bit. Well, tell me why you don't like going to Walmart in the middle of the day. Okay, so there's a lot of people there. Well, how does that concern you? How does that bother you, right? And what you're looking for, if you're asking that line of questioning, is for them to say something like, well, I don't know, I just feel like whenever people are looking at me, they're judging me. Or I don't know, I just feel really fat, and when people look at me, I know that they're just saying, oh God, here comes this, whatever. Or all these people in here know my dad, and I'm not as, I'm not living up to his baseball record. I'm making stuff up, right? Whatever it is, the social anxiety disorder is really about the person seeing other people. It's important that other people are there, right? It isn't the space, it's actually the people. That other people are regarding them in some negative way. That other people are actively looking at you in that moment and making some negative evaluation, being critical, being judgmental, making fun of you, maybe laughing right to the side. This is the fear of the person with social anxiety. It isn't being exposed in the sense of being seen. It's really about being seen because I can be judged. It's really about being seen because people are gonna notice that I'm not really good at dressing, or notice that I'm not really tall, or notice that I'm really bad at putting my mascara on. I don't know. But because of this, right, these people don't want to go in public because they don't want to face what they perceive will be a negative evaluation. Now, this is often not backed up. Sometimes it is, right? Some people get bullied, or some people get teased, but even still, right, that is probably a very small minority of the people that those folks are interacting with, such that their projection, their sense that everybody is thinking this about them, or everybody is thinking, I can't dress well, or look at his mascara run, whatever it is, right? That's the anxiety. Therein is the disorder, right? Everybody's not thinking this about you. People usually aren't really thinking about you at all, right? Think about you in public. You're thinking about yourself. If you're thinking about someone else, it's Probably because you like them, right? It's probably because you think they're attractive, or you think they said something funny, or you want to get to know them better, right? Rarely, not to say that it doesn't happen, but if you consider how much of the space in your head is dedicated to that, rarely are you in person with someone and kind of looking around like, ooh, I hate what she's wearing, I can't believe he left the house in those, right? Some people do that, but most people don't. And if you think about the time that you're spending doing that, and we do it sometimes, right? But you're probably not doing it most of the time. Mostly you think about yourself. Secondly, you think about people that you like. And then last, you think about people that you don't like, right? Even when they're right in front of you. And so these folks with the social anxiety disorder, right, generally are expecting that everybody is first thinking about me. It's a little bit narcissistic in many cases, but most people are thinking about me, and they don't like what they see. And so this is how they approach situations. And so they're going to be really reticent. They're going to be really hesitant to walk into situations, especially when they don't know folks. You will see people with social anxiety able to get over that. That is to say, I gotten to know you. I know you're not judging me. I know you think my mascara looks fine. And so I'm cool hanging out with you. I'm not going to be anxious going to your house. I'm not going to be anxious hanging out with you and your girlfriend, who I've also met and who I also trust, thinks my mascara looks great. But, oh, you guys want to go meet two of your other friends? I don't know, right? That's when you're going to see that anxiety. Or you guys want to go out to a bar tonight? Oh, is it usually packed? Or, right, this is when you're going to see that person kind of withdraw and be that socially anxious one again. But often they will be comfortable with folks that they've established some relationship with, and they have a sense that they're not going to be judgmental in that way that they expect. So there is this ability to have some separation of that, and to learn, hey, this person isn't thinking about me that way. I trust that. Whereas other people I don't know, again, is usually where it shows up. Other people I don't know are thinking negative things about me. So social anxiety disorder, I see this one a lot. I saw it a lot when I worked at a university counseling center. I don't know if it's just the place or what, but I imagine many college students, many young folks, kind of a sign of the times, but also just coming to college for the first time. You're kind of taken out of your usual environment and asked to meet a bunch of new folks. And if you grew up in a town where you just knew who you knew, that might be a little bit daunting to somebody. So I would just see a lot of folks coming through the counseling office when I worked at a counseling center at the university, who basically had some form of social anxiety, worried about making friends, difficulty, standing up in class speaking, or trying out for something on campus that they really wanted to be a part of, just because of that sense that somebody was going to evaluate them negatively. Again, some of that is just proper to the age, right? You're coming to college and meeting new people. There's going to be more social anxiety than when you're in a stable social situation. I do also think it's a bit a sign of the times, right? We're so used to people judging us and judging other people online in particular, right? People just say whatever they want, and people post things to have people judge them. So I think we're kind of used to that interactive style so much that folks, when they even step outside of their house, they're kind of thinking about this a little bit more, because that's how somebody would come across their Instagram post is, oh, what do I think of this person? Whether I like it or not, I might leave a comment, right? Versus in real life, you're very unlikely to leave a comment if you see somebody that you don't like, right? You don't like their bag, you're not gonna say, excuse me, what are the, you're not gonna make a point of doing that. Whereas online, maybe 50-50, ooh, I gotta tell that person this thing. So I think that's a piece of that. Now, agoraphobia is different, right? And again, it might look similar. It might look similar in the sense of, hey, I don't want to go to that place where the people are. Well, why not? What's going on with those people? Well, I don't know who's going to be there. I mean, you know how many people carry guns in Missouri? I could get shot in the back and not even know it was coming. So I like to go shopping when nobody's there. Midnight at best. I love these 24-hour places. I can just go in. There's only 2 people in there. I avoid them. I go to the self-checkout line, and there it is. Nobody can hurt me that way. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is agoraphobia isn't about an evaluation, right? It isn't about somebody judging me. It's about, I don't know what's going on, and it might not be safe in here. If I can't, I don't know who you are, what are you doing, right? If I can't have a sense of who this person is or what they have, or I can't see behind me all the time, I'm gonna be a bit anxious about what's going on because, something bad might happen. Somebody might sneak up and try to strangle me or something like that. Agoraphobia is often a symptom, but although here you see it is its own diagnosis, but it can be a symptom of other disorders. In particular, we're not going to get a chance to talk about it today, but in particular, we often see it as a symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder. That is to say, somebody's got PTSD, and one of the ways that this shows up for them is that they don't like to be in places where they can't see everybody, where they have to have somebody standing behind them, where they can't have their back to the wall, where they can't see the nearest exit, right? Where they need to have this type of control over a situation due to the fact that they've been in really dangerous situations, and now they have this hypervigilance about assessing threat, right? That amygdala is working really hard in folks with PTSD. And so again, agoraphobia can stand on its own. It might just be something that a person has related to, something that's happened, or maybe just something irrational agoraphobia, right? These disorders don't necessarily have to be rational. It might just be a learned behavior or something like that. But again, this is about not liking being in those open, unknown spaces, not for the people, but because of the space itself. These folks won't necessarily want to go into a building, even if it is empty, if they don't know where all the exits are, and if they know that they can't tell where people could come from, right? I tell you, hey, it's empty now, but we're still open, so anybody could walk in, and there's like 3 doors in the back somewhere, and there's one on the side of the aisle, but people don't usually come in that one, right? That type of uncertainty is gonna make the agoraphobic like, whoa. So it is empty, but you're telling me that at any time, right, a bunch of folks could come in and I'd be surrounded? I don't know, man. Maybe I'll just order it online. So again, the agoraphobic is really thinking about their safety. It's really more of a safety thing. I usually say in class, right, a lot of folks have some sense of this agoraphobia. If you are or know a person who, when they sit in a restaurant, has to be able to see the exit or has to have their back to a wall, right? These are kind of agoraphobic responses, not at all diagnosable, but you can get a sense of what that's like, that sense of, oh, I can't see behind me. This is kind of distracting that I can't see what's going on over there. All I can see is this wall I'm facing and you. Sometimes that's ADHD. I'll be honest, right? Sometimes the person is having that response because they just want to see, right? They're just curious, what is that? They just want to look over their shoulder. It's not necessarily that they're fearful of who's back there. And so just be careful about, it's not always the same thing, but if you're the type of person or a person who has that, like, oh no, if we're going to this restaurant, we're sitting close to the door, or I have to see the door, or no, you sit I'm sitting with my back to the wall, you sit over there, right? If you know that type of person who's doing that out of some sense of being threatened, again, not diagnosable, please don't misunderstand me, but that's just what it feels like, right? If this becomes debilitating in a person's life, they can't go anywhere, they can't do anything, they can't form relationships because, this and that. Right now we're talking about it's a problem. Remember our definition of a mental disorder. Is it causing distress? Is it causing some type of harm? If you just got this quirk where, we gotta sit with my back to the wall and my girlfriend isn't mine, so, that's just how it is, no big deal. Let me give you a page number for these last 2. So social anxiety disorder, which is a pretty long section, but it starts on page 203. And then agoraphobia right after that, I think. Oop. So page 217, and then general anxiety disorders on page 222. I put general anxiety disorder last because this is how you should think about it if you're ever in the diagnostic business. This is because unlike, for instance, major depressive disorder, which is kind of, here's the general depression disorder, most people probably this one, right? That's how you're kind of thinking about major depressive disorder. Oh, if it looks a little bit more like an anger issue, maybe it's this one. Or, oh, if it's a little bit more of a long-term depression, maybe it's this one, right? But you kind of start with the general. You start with the major depressive disorder. It's the opposite for anxiety. You end here. That is to say, if you can't find any specific reason that the person is anxious, then you might come down to this general anxiety disorder. And still then it needs some kind of specific qualifications. But if somebody comes in and they say, hey doc, I'm anxious, I'm really nervous, I'm about things, I blah, 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 I'm gonna start asking questions. Okay, well, is there anything in particular you're afraid of, right? No, I mean, blah, 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 different stuff. Okay, is it any kind of situation? Any situations get you nervous? Maybe new people, or maybe being away from somebody, or maybe, you know, being in a certain place, right? Any of that make you feel, you know, sometimes, but I mean, it's kind of all of it, right? I feel that way when people leave. I feel that way when people show up. I feel that way when the mail arrives sometimes, right? Like if, you know, they're still going on and on, but you can't really lock it down. Maybe it is this, but it is also this. And then sometimes it's that, and then I do get quiet when I'm feeling really nervous, so maybe it's that. And that one time that spider really freaked me out, and so now I just make sure I have a lot of spider spray around my house. Right? What we're getting at is that this person is just generally anxious. And here's what this disorder is about. This is a person who gets anxious about a lot of stuff. It's not specific to this location or being around people or thinking about panic or when mom leaves or when I'm meeting somebody new or, you know, spiders in the attic, right? It's nothing in particular. It's just everything freaks me out. I got a test coming up. I'm really nervous about my test, and then my boyfriend's gonna take me to this amusement park, and I don't know, I really don't know what I'm gonna wear. I don't know, I don't have anything, right? And oh my gosh, what if there's a lot of people there and they think my dress is dumb, right? Right, this is a general anxiety disorder. And it may not come boom, 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 boom like that, but it's just that type of thing where this thing that's on your mind today is really kind of making you anxious. This thing that's on your mind today is really making you anxious. But anything perhaps can get you there. And sometimes though, the person with general anxiety disorder actually isn't able to really name the anxiety. And so it's not that it's everything, but it's kind of everything, but it's nothing. They just feel really tense all the time. And I don't know, it's not in my head. I'm not worrying about anything, but I just feel really stressed. I don't know, right? And so sometimes it's not even everything in the sense that a person can name everything. Sometimes it's just everything in the sense that this person is kind of building up a lot of stress in their body and maybe they don't know why. Sometimes, for instance, it is the work of the therapy to kind of untangle, well, what are these things that are making you anxious? What is the source or the undercurrent of this general anxiety if it's not one of these more specific things? And so we're just usually taught to come to this last, right? First, investigate if it's one of these more specific things. If you're being thorough, and you should, right, you're probably going to look at this set of disorders as well before you go ahead and diagnose that general anxiety disorder. But if it feels like it's everything, and then again nothing, then this is probably your best bet and probably a good diagnosis. All right, so we're going to stop here. We are going to get to these two things, but we're just not going to get to them today. My class is waiting outside, of course. And so if you want to go ahead and look at some of the videos that I will post related to both obsessive compulsive disorder and in particular PTSD from the trauma disorders. I will also post a video about reactive attachment disorder. That's the really interesting one. So I'll post some videos for those, and then we'll lecture. I'll give you a lecture on those pieces next week. In the meantime, this is what we're talking about today. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to email me, maybe look in your book too and see if that's got some differing explanations. I don't think I have any videos on any of these, but again, if you see stuff in the playlist, just watch it. It's for your education. All right, thanks, and I will see you next week.